You've spent years adding new habits, reading self-improvement books, and following every productivity hack in existence. Yet somehow you're still the same person with the same problems. Why? Because you're treating transformation like an addition problem when it's actually a subtraction equation. In this video, I'll reveal why 87% of personal growth attempts fail within 30 days. Not because you lack discipline, but because you're trying to build a new identity without dismantling the old one. The neurological research is clear. Your brain physically cannot sustain contradictory identity structures. One must die for the other to live. Have you ever wondered why, despite consuming hundreds of self-improvement resources, you remain fundamentally unchanged? You follow all the advice, implement the strategies, yet something invisible keeps pulling you back to your starting point. This isn't coincidence or lack of willpower. Your brain is actively working against you in ways you've never realized. Welcome to what neuroscientists call identity homeostasis, the brain's biological mechanism that fiercely protects your current self-concept regardless of whether that self-concept serves you. This protective system operates like an immune response against anything that threatens who you believe yourself to be. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Your brain doesn't distinguish between negative identities that harm you and positive ones you want to maintain. It simply protects what is familiar. Every time you attempt to add a new habit or behavior that contradicts your core identity, your neural pathways literally create resistance. This resistance doesn't announce itself clearly. Instead, it manifests as sudden exhaustion when you try to meditate, mysterious distractions when you sit down to write, or an inexplicable loss of motivation precisely when you are making progress. Your brain isn't being randomly difficult. It's actively defending your existing identity against what it perceives as an existential threat. Recent neurological research reveals something fascinating. When we engage in behaviors inconsistent with our core identity, the same brain regions associated with physical pain and threat detection light up. Your brain literally processes identity challenges as physical danger. This explains why transformation feels so uncomfortable even when you logically know it's good for you. Look around and you'll spot this pattern everywhere. The fitness enthusiast who can effortlessly maintain a rigorous workout schedule but mysteriously can't stick with a daily 10-minute meditation practice. The creative professional who produces brilliant work but fails repeatedly at implementing basic organizational systems. The deeply empathetic person who understands boundaries intellectually but feels physically unable to enforce them in real life. In each case, the new behavior contradicts an established identity structure, triggering an automatic protection response. What makes this mechanism particularly insidious is that it operates below conscious awareness. When you experience resistance to change, you likely attribute it to lack of discipline, poor strategies, or simply not wanting it badly enough. But you're actually experiencing identity preservation, your brain's homeostatic mechanism working exactly as designed, maintaining your psychological status quo at all costs. The truly frustrating part? The more you fight against this resistance through sheer willpower and discipline, the stronger the homeostatic response becomes. This creates that painfully familiar cycle of initial progress followed by regression. Think about how many times you've made headway toward a goal only to find yourself sabotaging your progress just as things were looking promising. That wasn't random failure, it was your brain's homeostatic mechanism restoring equilibrium. This understanding exposes the fundamental error in the addition mindset that keeps countless ambitious people trapped in cycles of temporary change for decades. You can't simply add new behaviors that contradict your current identity and expect them to stick. Your neural architecture is designed to reject such impositions, regardless of how beneficial they might be. Real transformation isn't about adding new behaviors, but about strategically dismantling aspects of your current identity to create space where new patterns can take root without resistance. It's not about becoming more, it's about becoming less first. The parts of you that stand in opposition to your growth must be allowed to die before anything new can truly flourish. Those parts that must die, they're likely the very ones you're most desperate to preserve. What if your most cherished self-definition, the stories you tell about who you are, aren't precious foundations of your identity, but sophisticated defense mechanisms keeping you trapped in mediocrity? Alan Watts offered a profound perspective on this paradox through his metaphor of waves and the ocean. He suggested that our perception of a separate fixed self is fundamentally an illusion, like a wave believing it exists independently from the ocean. This attachment to a rigid self-concept doesn't just create philosophical confusion, it generates real suffering through the alienation and disconnection it fosters. When we cling to who we think we are, we resist the natural flow of who we might become. Look closely at the aspects of your identity you defend most vigorously, and you'll find something unsettling, but often compensatory identities masking your deepest insecurities. That workaholic badge you wear with pride, it might be nothing more than elaborate armor, protecting you from a primal fear of insignificance. Your perfectionist tendencies, likely a sophisticated shield against the terror of rejection. These identities didn't form by accident. They emerged as protection, as survival mechanisms during moments when you felt vulnerable. The irony is painful but important. These protective identities served you once, but now they've become the very prisons limiting your growth. The workaholic identity that once provided safety through achievement now prevents you from finding balance and deeper fulfillment. The perfectionist identity that once shielded you from criticism now blocks your creativity and spontaneity. What once protected you now confines you. How do you identify which aspects of your identity need to die? Start by paying attention to emotional resistance. Those moments when you feel disproportionately defensive about a self-possession. Notice the identity-based excuses that flow automatically from your lips. I'm just not a morning person. I'm terrible with numbers. I'm too sensitive for confrontation. These aren't neutral observations. They're identity attachments creating artificial boundaries around your potential. Also examine areas where you've repeatedly tried and failed. The person who has attempted meditation 20 times but can't sit still isn't describing an immutable trait, but revealing an identity in conflict with a desired behavior. These patterns of repeated failure often point directly to the identities that require dissolution before growth can occur. I have witnessed this transformation repeatedly in my coaching practice. One client, a brilliant creative director, struggled for years with organizational systems until she recognized and released her core identity as a spontaneous creative who works best in chaos. Another, a compassionate therapist, only broke through her income ceiling after abandoning her identity as someone who doesn't care about money. Their breakthroughs didn't come from finding better techniques. They came from strategic identity dissolution. This process follows 3 critical steps. First, identify the limiting identity that's creating resistance. Second, trace its origins to understand its protective purpose. When did this identity first serve you? And what vulnerable part of yourself was it designed to shield? Third, consciously create a void where that identity once existed. This isn't about replacing it immediately with another identity, but about allowing space for new possibilities. I won't sugarcoat this. The void is uncomfortable. Research shows that the fear of losing your identity triggers a natural fear response, creating genuine discomfort during identity dissolution. When you release the workaholic identity, you'll face the existential anxiety it was designed to keep at bay. When you let go of perfectionism, you'll encounter the raw vulnerability of potential rejection. This discomfort isn't failure. It's the exact space required for authentic transformation. The truth about transformation isn't found in adding more tactics to your life. It's about the profound act of letting go. Research in both psychology and ancient wisdom traditions confirms this counterintuitive reality. Non-attachment and release are directly linked to improved mental well-being and resilience. This isn't just theoretical, it's neurologically validated. The space you create through strategic release becomes the fertile ground where authentic growth finally takes root. Your transformation journey begins when you stop clinging to who you think you are. Much like the teachings of Taoism and Buddhism suggest, true evolution requires accepting impermanence with equanimity. The death of your old self isn't a tragedy, it's liberation. When you release the rigid identity structures that have defined you, you don't lose yourself, you gain access to parts of yourself that have been waiting to emerge. The courage to let aspects of yourself die is precisely what allows your authentic self to come alive. Remember this, in the void created by releasing what no longer serves you lies your greatest potential for transformation. Your old self must die, not through violent rejection, but through conscious surrender. This is the paradox at transformation's core. To become who you truly are, you must first let go of who you've been.